10-person wilderness survival challenge. The last person standing wins $500,000. These 10 folks came to Vancouver Island all pumped up. It's gorgeous here. But with beauty often comes danger. Desmond drew a pretty sweet spot. No worries about water here. First thing, he plans to set up a safe shelter. Then, it's off to find some food. His thoughts are clear, his goals are sharp. Way to go, young man. The deeper into the dense, damp forest, the creepier it gets. Bear poop starts appearing on the ground. That got Desmond feeling all jittery. He takes a moment to steady himself and decides to push further in. After all, he's been a soldier for 7 years. Getting scared off by some poop? That'd be ridiculous. He joined the show to brag a bit, even boasted about it to friends and family.
If somebody see the bear fight, they need to help the bear.
Right.
Seems like he might be eating his words a bit sooner than expected. And there's another pile of bear poop, still steaming. Now he's really not feeling calm. Keeps moving, hoping to find a safer spot. But the deeper he goes, the more bear poop he finds. To avoid attracting the bear, he hangs his food up high. Then there's Mary, the female contestant. Stepped off the plane and somehow ended up soaked. She needs to find a spot to camp and make a fire, fast. She quickly picks a prime spot and gets to work. Being a mom, Mary can't help but miss her kids, especially her 2 adorable daughters, one a little fairy, the other a little angel. She herself is a hero in an elite firefighting squad. She's on this show to push her limits and set an example for her girls. She throws together a simple frame, covers it with waterproof material, and voila, a makeshift tent. But it's a bit small, and there's a lot of tarp left over, just enough to lay on the ground to keep out the damp. Back to Desmond, he's getting more panicked the more he walks. Feels like bears are everywhere. Suddenly, he hears a weird noise. To boost his courage and maybe scare off any bears, he yells a few times into the bushes. Trembling, he moves ahead. Finally, he circles back to the river. He just can't stay in the woods anymore. Now, Desmond can't focus on anything. His mind's full of bear shadows, and every little rustle makes him jump. Hope this guy doesn't end up bailing because of fear. By the lake, Tracy, our hefty contender, effortlessly yanked out an annoying tree with her bare hands. She's a former military and law enforcement officer, so her shooting skills are top-notch. She's a big meat lover, blessed with both a son and a daughter, and even has a dog she adores. Tired of the easy life, she's now on a quest for a deeper spiritual journey, looking to explore her inner self. In no time, Tracy sets up a temporary tent, and that's where she'll crash tonight. Then there's Larry, clean-shaven and only 44, but he's already ticked off the major life milestones. His son, tall and handsome, has graduated from college, and his daughter, both sweet and graceful, stands tall. He's been happily married to his loving and gentle wife for 26 years. For those still being nagged to get married in their 30s, wouldn't you envy him? Bored of the blissful routine, he's decided to step away from the mundane to live a life less ordinary. Right now, Larry is scouting for a place to settle down for the night. The area is dense with bushes, and finding flat ground isn't easy. After some surveying and evaluating, he chooses a cedar by the river to sleep under tonight. After setting up his tent, Larry admits to the camera that he made a stupid mistake, though it's hard to see what went wrong. Can any pros out there explain? He heads upstream, hoping to find a better spot, but then it starts raining. The fog rolls in, blanketing the forest and severely reducing visibility. The ground turns exceptionally slippery, and despite using his axe to climb, Larry still ends up slipping. A tree branch then pokes him in the eye, and he starts to lose his cool.
I hate this place.
Who would have thought this guy, all prim and proper on the outside, had such a wild side? The next day, Tracy arrives at a spot full of mussels, her absolute favorite. There's enough here to last her half a year, but hands in pockets, she sighs. Turns out, before coming here, the showrunners had informed them that due to red tide, these shellfish were carrying a lot of viruses and weren't safe to eat. So close yet so far, it's just heartbreaking. All she can do is swallow her disappointment and walk away. Meanwhile, Larry is still fretting over his tent. He wants to make a pear-shaped tent and has been looking for a flat spot. He's now cut down a tree to use as the main sloping pole, laid out the tarp, and is setting up some stakes to keep the tarp taut. This setup should just about get him through the night. Once that's done, he finally takes a moment to appreciate the scenery. Desmond sat by the river, zoning out all afternoon. His mind was completely blank, his willpower shattered. He knew what he had to do now. Yep, it was time to head home. The crew was in total shock. Is this your idea of a half-day tour on Vancouver Island? Although he wanted to be a man who saw things through, the bear poop scared the life out of him. He never actually saw a bear, but the fear of the unknown took over. And just like that, the first contestant was sent home. It all happened so fast. Come evening, Tracy was sitting in her tent by the fire. She heard some odd noises and grabbed an axe for courage. Lying in her sleeping bag, she managed a strained smile. The sound of the rain mixed with other bizarre noises, and it seemed something flashed by. Tracy, flashlight in hand, started searching around cautiously. At night, you really have to watch out for cougar attacks, especially for someone of her size. Running away was practically impossible. All she could hope was that the cougar wasn't into fatty food. Mary was also disturbed by the rain, but she was a lot more optimistic, except her boots were still wet, which annoyed her. She finally got up, put on her clothes, and discovered her tent was leaking. Everything was soaked, her bag, her sleeping bag. She collapsed in a corner, questioning her life choices. The next morning, Mary began cleaning up the mess. Everything was damp, and it sure didn't lift her spirits. But she quickly adjusted her attitude and started building an A-frame structure, which would drain well. She laid out the tarp on the ground to keep dry. Finding dry firewood in a tropical rainforest isn't easy, and Larry was stressing over it. After a lot of effort, he only managed to gather a small handful of damp wood. Back at camp, he tried to start a fire with a flint, rubbing his hands together, worried about his shelter. If the river rose, his home would be flooded, and he'd need to find a new place to stay. It got dark quickly, and he said there were 2 bears outside the tent. He went out with a light.
Get out of here! Get out of here! Get out of here!
And though I saw nothing, he insisted they were there. At least he wasn't backing down because of fear. This guy in big shorts is Justin. He spent 15 years in the military, even went to war, and had just recently left. Many struggle with their mental state after leaving the military, and he had a plan: take everyone on hiking trips. He believed that connecting with nature could heal the emptiness inside. Military life was all about teamwork, but this time, he was going it alone, a whole new challenge. Now he headed into the woods to look for food. A duck appeared by the lake, and he chose to let it go, apparently not hungry enough yet. On day 5, Mary woke from a daze. She thought she heard her child calling out for her. Looking around, there was no daughter, no breakfast, just a bird and the pattering rain. All of it snapped her back to reality. She's setting up a barrier to keep the rain out and get a fire going. Mary just got on with it, axe in hand and out the door. She's got that gypsy blood in her veins. That's where her courage comes from. She chopped notches, built the frame, then covered it with a tarp. Being meticulous, she also gathered stones and made a ring around the area for fire protection, effectively separating her kitchen from her sleeping area. But it makes me wonder how she'll keep warm in the winter. This guy, David, looks mad, but he's not really. He just has a fierce look. He's a divorced dad with 3 kids. He wanted his kids to experience using moss instead of toilet paper. But that was just his wishful thinking. Over the past few years, he's been through divorce, moving, and other life changes. His kids are really supportive of him joining this competition. That's where he draws his strength and faith from. He thinks he could live here till he starves. He went down to the river to try fishing. David tied a rope to a tree, spaced out several fishing lines along it, each with its own hook, an automatic fishing trap all set. He's pretty confident in his skills. Now, all he has to do is wait. This man is setting traps, simple ones for catching mice and rabbits, and another deadly one for prey as big as a bear. He explained for a while.
That'll loop around there. The way to the rock will be here. So the rock will be pressing down on this, and then there'll be a bait stick, which is running from your toggle to the end of the rock, or the end of the log, or whatever you have. So what will happen is the creature will come up, pick off that bait stick. That'll cause the trap to trigger, and then the rock to fall and collapse on the animal. So it's actually a very humane way to kill it.
And I didn't quite get it, but he couldn't find the right rocks during the setup and had to use a 300-pound log instead. After setting it up, he brewed a cup of Iron Mountain tea, rich in vitamin C, good for soothing sore throats and coughs, perfect to cool him down. This long-haired, handsome guy is Randy. This is his photo without a beard. Just one look and you're smitten, right? No daydreaming, he's got a son. He works at a wilderness survival school, and now's a good time to put his skills to the test. The female contestant, Nicole, seems in good spirits. She wants to take everyone around for a walk, starting with a beach stroll on Vancouver Island, a place that makes her feel at home. She lives in Oregon, and the longest she's been away from her 2 kids was 7 weeks, which she found extremely tough. But her son said it was quite relaxing without mom around. She's a primitive skills instructor, skilled in botany and making tinctures. She has multiple sclerosis and was once unable to walk. Medication didn't help for years, but she cured herself with herbal remedies, so she's deeply grateful to nature. She joined the show for another reason too. 2 years ago, her foster son drowned in the Atlantic, right where she's challenging herself now. She's not quite sure why she's competing, maybe to inspire the kids. Nicole's shelter isn't finished yet. It still needs a lot of support and debris to cover the roof to ensure it stays warm inside. While working, she heard birds chirping. Nicole is a real-life level 12 bird language expert. Just by listening to the birds, she can tell where there might be snakes, cheetahs, lions, and other animals. Birds are her detection radar. With such a powerful natural skill, isn't she just booking her way to the championship? Mary's still tweaking her shelter on the other side. She strung a stick across the A-frame and hung some ferns to craft a simple door. Then, she rigged up a tripod to keep the door off the ground and away from the mud. After finishing, Mary did a little victory dance, moved in to try it out, and it wasn't too shabby. She could even see outside. When she woke up in the morning, she greeted her daughter's photos with "Ah, good morning" before starting a fire to boil water. The new barrier worked like a charm, and the fire was going strong in no time, though it needed a bit more wood. Grabbing the axe, Mary started chopping, but maybe she was too homesick and distracted, because on the 3rd chop, down came the axe on her own hand. Her thumb wouldn't lift, trembling from the pain. Injuries can easily get infected in the wild. Will this make her drop out of the competition? The 6th contestant is Bearded Mike, a pilot and wilderness survival instructor. First, let's check out his breakfast. He's collected various seaweeds laid out on a stump. This one, similar to green onions, is super sweet, and the roots of this seaweed are edible too. This kelp with a tail crunches loudly when bitten, though it's a bit salty. Now that the tide is out, he's off to hang his gill net. The creek flows into the bay where he's placed his net just right, hoping the tide changes will bring him a catch. But for now, it seems more like a good time for a tennis match. Meanwhile, Mike keeps foraging. Besides seaweed, he finds long, steaming bear droppings, exciting him because he finally has food, which makes Desmond, who was scared off by a bear, feel even worse. Justin is even more daring than Mike, just strutting around the woods in his underwear. He hasn't found any food, nor spotted any bears or rabbits. At the riverbank, he discovered a duck, dead without any bite marks or blood, leading him to suspect it was poisoned. That makes the meat inedible. Justin was really frustrated about it. Meat right there. But he can't eat it. Puffing up his cheeks like a pufferfish, he finally decided to throw the duck into the sea in frustration. Randy found his trap triggered, but no prey caught. Since arriving on the island, he's been eating mushrooms and hasn't had any meat. He figures if he can't catch anything on land, he better get ready to cast nets for fishing. Just as he was about to start a fire, he couldn't find his flint anywhere. It reminded me of Sean from season 7, who had to quit after losing his flint, but I still had faith in him. The way he searched for things was pretty sophisticated, not just randomly rummaging around, but going back through the video footage. Sure enough, he found where the flint had gone. It had rolled into the fire pit and, sadly, was already burnt up. Now, he could only look for materials to start a fire by friction, but it was so damp here that it made starting a fire even harder. Randy spent half the day getting everything ready. After carving a notch in a wooden board with his knife, he started rubbing it non-stop. Last season, someone lost their flint, and he even mocked them for making such a rookie mistake. Now, the tables have turned, and how? He rubbed away for ages, but all we saw was smoke. No fire. He blamed the ineffective pumice stone and figured he needed to find a better rock. I was really worried this guy might just fail to make fire and drop out. By day 7 of the survival challenge, while others were still worried about food, Mike had already started storing up. Early in the morning, Mike went to check his fishing net and from a distance saw a fish. Upon pulling up the net, he found 3 fish instead of 1. He decided not to eat them all at once, but to cook and bury them. Eating the fish reminded him of his wife, Barbara. Mike had been an orphan since childhood, and his wife filled that emotional void. Now he had 3 kids and 3 grandkids, but he had lost his daughter a few years back. Those painful memories and heartbreaking experiences were bearable with his wife by his side, but now he faced them alone. He dug a hole in the ground, placed the cooked fish inside, and buried them in a way that would protect them from light and oxygen damage. He covered them with seaweed to mask the smell and then buried them with sand. If the temperature stayed low enough, the fish could last 2 days, provided a bear didn't find them. After handling all this, he took a walk by the river. Tracy also took out her fishing net today. She decided to use it to catch fish, hanging it on a branch and carefully placing it in the water.
Hey! Go away!
It scared me for a second. I thought a bear was coming. But after looking around for a long while, there was nothing. Well, she said she was just rehearsing. If a predator came, she'd have to shout like that. She also said that she wasn't as afraid of bears and wolves as she was of the silently lurking cougars. After setting the net, she left full of hope. Randy's got 2 choices in front of him: either throw in the towel and head home, or put in the effort to adapt and overcome the challenges. He found a rock with a little indentation, which might just be the key to unlocking success. Back at camp, he started trying to make fire again. He felt like he was going insane.
Holy shit, I got one.
Lying on the ground, blowing gently into the embers, carefully pouring them into the fire pit, holding them in his hands and blowing lightly. Finally, he sparked a flame of hope. But thinking about the long, painful process he'd have to go through every time he needed to start a fire, he just hoped this fire would never go out. Meanwhile, Mike's feeling off, his heart suddenly uncomfortable. He thinks it might be a bit of homesickness, or maybe he's just really missing his wife. He can't sleep, sits up, and stares into the starry sky, missing his wife dearly. I'm starting to wonder if this guy might just head home soon. Tracy finally got to eat some decent food. As the tide went out, she couldn't wait to get to the shore to check her nets. Lucky day, 2 for the price of 1, a crab and a fish. She quickly prepped both and threw them into the pot. The cameras cut to her enjoying the meal. Eating meat for the first time here really tasted like happiness. Tracy says she's not here to push her limits. She knows where her limits are. She started recalling some tough times. Back in July 1997, after a busy day on the road, she heard about a shooting on the radio. She hesitated for a few seconds, but decided to head to the scene. By the time she arrived, it was too late. She regretted her hesitation and has gone to sleep with guilt every night since. Tonight seems to be another sleepless night. She heard a bear during her morning rehearsal, and now it was coming in handy. Tracy then heard the sound of snapping branches and gave the bear a final warning.
Get on out of here! Get! You heard me, get!
Then she heard clear snorting. Clutching her bear spray, she couldn't dare sleep. Instead, she got up, saw a pair of shining eyes in the dark, and started yelling at it. Turns out it was just a bear cub trying to get close. She set off a firework at the bear, and luckily, it got scared off. Jose took out his digging stick. Living by the Yukon River, he likes to view the world through indigenous eyes. He makes his own clothes from animal hides and teaches survival skills to others. This time, he's really putting his skills to the test. He's not too worried about his son. His biggest concern is his wife, Shauna. He hopes she can keep things together while he's away. He doesn't want to boast, as he believes having humility can save one from embarrassment. Sounds a bit like he's talking about Desmond from the last episode who had to drop out. Now, he's digging up spruce roots, which make excellent rope. He peels the bark with his fingernails and soaks them in water to keep them flexible. Next, he's making a bellows. He hollows out a piece of wood, opens a small hole at the front, and fits two together like this. He takes out the spruce roots soaked in water, ties them up, and just like that, a bellows is ready. When the fire's about to go out, all he has to do is blow like this.
It really revives fires.
He said this thing could also be used as a musical instrument when he's bored. Having a bit of music in the woods isn't too bad, although all I heard was some puffing sounds.
Ooh, clouds pour their potion.
Speaking of music, hers was more pleasing to the ears. Nicole was singing while perfecting her shelter when suddenly she heard a strange noise. She dropped what she was doing and followed the sound, only to see a black bear across the bay. Nicole quickly snapped a few close-ups of it. She is eating something called sea asparagus, which she guessed the bear might be eating too. Everyone was eating their greens, minding their own business, just as she had hoped. David went to check the catch in his fishing traps, hoping for a good result. Pulling up the line, he found a big bundle of seaweed. Looks like he needed to fix the line. He was quite disappointed, and right on cue, it started to rain. It was day 7.
I can't lift my thumb, I can't lift my thumb, I can't lift my thumb, mother.
The tape recorder of this scenario was Mary. Her hands were trembling and bleeding. Don't think it's a minor issue. A severed radial artery can lead to permanent loss of hand function within 4 to 6 hours. Trembling, she unzipped the emergency pack, pulled out the GPS, a standard issue for all contestants to contact rescue teams when necessary. She pressed the button to initiate an emergency response. Blood kept flowing from her hand, and the rescue team was slow to arrive. She pressed the button a few more times and added a voice announcement. Then she treated the wound herself until the rescue team finally showed. From a distance, they signaled for Mary to raise her hand. The wound was deep, about an inch long, and her hand was numb but cold. Seeing the blood-soaked gauze on the ground made her hand hurt even more. Finally, assisted by medical staff, she ended her contest. On the boat, she pursed her lips, feeling a bit like crying. She had never imagined she would leave the competition like this, injured by her own axe. The more she thought about it, the more foolish it seemed. But that's life. You can't predict or redo it. Larry might have heard about Mary getting injured and leaving the competition because of her own axe. At that moment, he was installing a protective cover on his axe. Speaking to the camera, he reflected a lot, like how tough the journey was and how there wasn't even a hint of a path. He ended up talking too much and got thirsty. Thankfully, the heavens weren't too unkind. His thirst brought some rain, but the noisy river was disturbing his peace, so he decided to move. He found 2 cedar trees snapped in half and hoped this would be his new shelter. He started sawing wood for stakes and found another 2 logs for the frame. The slippery ground even caused him to fall. The survival challenge reached day 7, and 2 contestants had already been eliminated. Guess who might be next? The $1 million survival challenge had the quirkiest reason for dropping out ever: fearing to scare a baby bear. This time, the Wilderness Survival Challenge was set in a forest known for grizzly bear sightings, where an encounter with a bear was highly likely.
Get the hell out of here. I see you. Get out of here.
Looks like even bears are scared of the cops, got scared off by Tracy's fierceness. Encountering 2 bears in one night, this lady couldn't keep her cool. Think she was crying out of fear? Think smaller. She was just mortified that the camera caught her fierce moment. Her well-maintained ladylike image completely shattered. Really, it was too embarrassing to watch. Tracy couldn't help but sob, covering her face. That was a bit too sudden, huh? The crew was pretty baffled picking her up.
When I saw the little bear, it was just this feeling of remorse hit me for being so aggressive over it, because that's the way I've always been. I've just been uber aggressive, and I just felt really bad.
Clearly scared off, but still claiming it so boldly. Well, all I can say is safe travels. Mike dreamed last night that his wife Barbara was kissing him, and he passionately responded. Waking up to find it was a slug on his lips, thinking about kissing a slug all night, he felt he'd never shake off that mental image. Maybe keeping busy would help him forget sooner. In the damp rainforest, life is always especially tough. Mike was setting up a drying rack over the fire, hammering 4 stakes into the ground, tying sticks on the sides, and laying 2 more across the top to dry the firewood. With his mild OCD, his wood chopping is different from others, sorting the wood by length and thickness, arranged neatly. Such a meticulous guy, he also hates squatting down to make fire, decided to build a stove 1 meter high. He says he'll stick it out here for a year. In no time, Mike had hammered in the 4 stakes, tied up the beams, and placed the cut planks on top. A stove was built. Then he spread sand and stones collected from the beach on top to insulate against the heat, preventing the table from burning. Now it's time to witness a miracle. Bored, he even made a pedal-operated running water tap from collected trash. First, he fixed a plastic barrel to a tree with a stick, found a longer stick to tie to the barrel, attached a rope to the end, looped it over a branch, and tied it to a pedal. Making full use of the lever principle, a step on the pedal gets the water flowing. Not pretty, but very practical. Looks like his talk of staying a year wasn't just talk. Stove, drying rack, kitchen, running water, fully equipped. Truly achieved wilderness modernization. This guy's got something, huh? He feels all he's missing is bringing his wife over. Larry finally caught a fish, couldn't wait for the tide to go out, wanted to pull in the net. Though it was just a small fish, he was really too hungry. But as he pulled, the fish slipped away. He really regretted not waiting for the tide, hunger overwhelming his brain, sick of eating the same old sea snails. Finally, when the tide was out, he checked the net again, found a fish struggling on it. Learning from the morning's lesson, he knocked the fish out before comfortably lifting it. Turning his head, he spotted another. Happiness came so suddenly. Larry cried tears of joy, then caught another fish on his rod. He was over the moon, shouting by the riverbank.
Good sir. Hello, good sir. Another deuce. Another double.
David wasn't so lucky. He'd been starving for days, dreaming of fried chicken and burritos, his top cravings. If he could order, he'd go for 4 pieces of original recipe chicken with fries and a Coke. Perfect. But there's nothing around here. I didn't get why he was digging in the rock cracks for food. After fumbling around, he collapsed from hunger, not even knowing what day it was. He got up to check the fishing net by the river. Empty. Seems like a waste of money on that net, with only the wind laughing at him through its whispers. Larry was also pinning his hopes on fishing. He cast a net and even put down a fishing rod, but caught nothing. He decided to make a spear for fishing at low tide. After a lot of cutting and fixing, he finally made it. One end a spear for large animals, and the other forked for fishing. It looked pretty legit, but who knows how well it'll work. David brought a fishing net with him, but it hadn't seen much action these past few days. So he decided to make another one to boost his chances of catching fish. After carving a shuttle from cedar, he started a net-making tutorial.
The first step of the process is to tie a series of loops all the way down the net, and then I'm going to come back and start netting to them, back and forth, switching sides on the net, back and forth, just going and going. To tie the knots, you have to pass the entire ball of string through the loops, and that's what the net needle is all about. It holds all the string you're working with and allows you to pass the giant coil of string through the knot.
Hungry and thinking of fried chicken, he quickly ran out of fishing line. Now he needs to find more. It's a wilderness survival challenge for 10 people, and 7 are left. Larry's inside roasting fish, not wasting even the bones, stewing them for tomorrow's breakfast. Catching 4 fish in one day was his proudest moment, boosting his confidence massively. Nicole always appears cheerful, having another great day. She marked the date on a stick. It's her 9th day here. Heading out for breakfast, she knows slugs and mushrooms are edible, but she's hoping for something better. Nicole went to the river to set her net, right across from where a bear was spotted yesterday. Bears love fish. Surely there are some here. It's her first time setting a net, and it was a bit clumsy. Now she's soaking wet and the net setting was pretty awkward. Justin looked like he hadn't woken up properly yet.
It's day 276. I have learned how to communicate with the animals.
He just started laughing uncontrollably and couldn't continue acting. Better get back to some real work. He went to check his fishing net, not really expecting much, just felt like it was something he ought to do. Surprisingly, luck was on his side and he found a fish in the net, which made him as happy as a 200-pound man. The net was made from his hammock, so it seems it was somewhat useful after all. It was a ratfish, with a long, sharp tail just like a rat's. Justin's fish filleting skills were pretty terrible. He put the chopped fish into the pot. That's probably about 30 or 40 grams of protein right there. His first taste of seafood since arriving. David was now dealing with dehydration. It hadn't rained for days. The sleepiness from dehydration made him even lazier. To prevent it from getting worse, he got up to make a fire and boil some water. Pine bark mixed with spruce juice would make the fire last longer. He was looking forward to a sip of hot water, but accidentally knocked over the pot. After calming down, he started the fire again. Up to now, David hadn't had a proper meal and felt completely out of his element. The loneliness was overwhelming. The next morning, Nicole went to check her fishing net, and right outside, she encountered the same bear from before, this time with 2 cubs. They were eyeing Nicole, drooling unconsciously. The net was too close to the bears for comfort. Nicole didn't dare make any sudden moves. The bears were also waiting for the right moment. She greeted the bears.
Hey, bear!
And when she noticed they didn't react much, she slowly approached the net. Suddenly, the bear mother stood up. Nicole freaked out and ran. Could she outrun a bear? The $1 million survival challenge was into its 10th day, and 3 contestants had been sent home. Fear, injury, or just mental breakdown could all be reasons for elimination. Last time, Nicole was scared away by the bear family while checking her net. She ran back to the camp and stayed in her tent, too scared to move, shivering with hunger all night. Not giving up, she went back to the river early the next morning.
Birds are alarming over there. There's something over there. Holy crap.
Turns out, her net had caught a fish. The struggling fish threw up huge splashes, scaring away birds. The fish must have weighed at least 50 pounds. No need to worry about food for half a month. To avoid damaging the net, Nicole crouched down carefully trying to remove the fish, but ended up getting splashed. Annoyed, she brought over a big stone, but still couldn't calm the fish down. Finally, she had to take out her knife. The fish met a more peaceful end. Holding the fish, she was very excited, shouting, hoping someone would share it with her. Nicole took out the fish head, deciding to make it into a specimen to give to her son when she got home. To avoid attracting bears with the smell of blood, she started cleaning the fish in the river, letting the blood flow away with the stream. All the while, she kept an anxious eye out for bears. After all, they weren't the company she wanted to share with. Nicole strung up part of the fish with cedar branches and slowly smoked it over the fire. This technique would allow the fish to be preserved for several days. She fried the fish bones in a skillet for breakfast today.
Oh, it's really good. Oh my God.
On the other side, David wasn't having much luck. His fishing net had been empty for over a week now, and he was feeling pretty down about it. He'd pulled in all his nets, having caught nothing but seaweed and shells to live on. And now he was just lying there on the solid wood sofa, talking nonsense because he was so hungry. He thought about calling the show's producers, but the promise of $1 million prize and a better life for his kids kept him going, no matter how tough it got. But honestly, looking at him now, I bet he'll be the next one to go. Before, surviving on just seaweed, David had almost given up on the competition. But there he was, lying by the shore, watching the sea otters swim and drooling over the sight of real food. Desperate for a good meal, he scoured the area around the camp and found lots of small fish hiding under the seaweed. He chopped a branch to use as a fishing rod, picked up some shells for bait, and started fishing. After changing spots countless times and losing his hook a few times, he finally caught a fish. No more seaweed for today. David quickly set up a simple stove, cleaned the fish a bit, and started to make a fish stew. That bowl of soup finally gave him some hope. Let's see what Justin is up to. He's tying a handle on something. Is he planning to climb a tree and raid a bird's nest? Turns out, he said the thing was just for fun and didn't really do anything practical. He also found a big iron chain and made a pull-up bar to add to his outdoor gym. Is he training for the Olympics or what? Justin did a few pull-ups easily, a couple of deadlifts, and finished off with some bicep curls. After showing off his buff muscles, he did some stretches. All refreshed after his workout, I think he could totally start an outdoor gym back home. He could make a killing. Haven't seen Randy for a few days now. He's been busy chopping trees and building a shelter. Ever since he lost his flint, he's had to be extra careful with keeping his fire going, which has really set him back. His shelter is only half done, and with winter coming, he needs to speed things up. He's been chopping non-stop, hauling wood from dawn to dusk, and he's finally got a small cabin shaped up. Now, he needs to go out and find some food. Since Nicole caught that big fish, life's been pretty sweet for her. But she woke up this morning to find her breath turning to mist. Looks like the temperature's dropping fast. With smoke swirling outside and a big storm on its way, she knew she had to hurry and get a door on her house. She gathered a bunch of small sticks and wove them together with rope, and pretty soon she had a movable solid wood door all set up. Nicole gathered a bunch of pine branches and spruced up her shelter, which not only looked good, but also helped keep it warm and block the wind. With everything set, she started praying for the rain to come quickly. This was a tough break for the contestants who hadn't finished their shelters yet. Over by the shore, Jose was really worried about his fishing net, his key survival tool, which was nearly swept away by the waves. Braving the storm, he waded through knee-deep water to save it. The net was loaded with seaweed, and the rough waves made it hard to clean. But he didn't give up and even snagged a fish in the process, which he considered a little gift from heaven for his hard work. Back at the shelter, Jose enjoyed the best meal he'd had since arriving, a feast of fish. As for the storm raging outside, it hardly mattered to him anymore. Justin, who had planned to go fishing, was chased back by the fierce wind and waves, almost tornado-like. As the rain started, he sprinted back to his tent. Cozy by a small fire and listening to the storm outside, he was pretty content. But lying around got boring fast, so he got up and started tinkering with a seaweed urinal. After testing it on camera, he cheekily challenged, "Dare you turn around and see if I'll report you?" He found it pretty handy, especially for midnight bathroom breaks. David couldn't believe the wild waves in front of him. The spot where he used to clean fish was now submerged, and the areas for walking and fishing were just spray and waves. A huge wave came and swept away his kitchen tools. His cries for them to come back were in vain. Meanwhile, Nicole was tucked inside her tent, glad she'd fortified her shelter today. With the storm howling outside, she felt super cozy and suddenly remembered to check her fishing net, which might get washed away. Stepping outside, she was almost blown away by the wind and realized retrieving the net was a lost cause. Better to stay safe inside her tent. Randy was the only one not fishing. He'd pinned his hopes on traps instead. But luck wasn't on his side. The trap wasn't triggered and the bait was gone. Looks like he'd have to tweak the sensitivity of his setup. If he couldn't catch his prey, he'd have to resort to eating slugs. Fortunately, his second trap worked. Seeing the thin slice of meat made tears of excitement roll down his cheeks. He first singed the hair off the rat over a fire, then scraped off the charred parts, and finally roasted it over the coals. After devouring the rat, bones and all, he was thoroughly satisfied. Though small, the rat's protein content was about the equivalent of 2 eggs. Finishing his meal boosted his confidence immensely. He defined this meal as a champion's breakfast. Lots of viewers are curious about how contestants manage bathroom breaks in the wild. Let Mike fill you in on that. He's gone for a uniquely shaped tree root. Check out that perfect curve. It's topped with a natural green moss cushion, and the hole in the middle is just the right size. It's pretty much perfect. There's nothing you can think of that he can't do. This DIY genius is now scouring the beach for plastic bottles to store food. His luck is as good as ever. He found a big plastic box. I thought he'd turn it into a fridge, but he told me he's building a boat to sail to deeper waters to net some big salmon. Well, let's look forward to that. As dusk fell, Larry was still by the shore, waiting for the tide to recede so he could collect his nets. He felt like the island he was on was cursed. Darkness fell long before the tide went out. It was slippery, and the fish almost got away, but he quickly grabbed hold of this hard-earned meal. Next up was lighting a fire to cook the fish, but the wood was all wet and wouldn't light. In this situation, if you don't cook or chill the fish, it'll spoil in an hour. Larry kept trying to start a fire while complaining, but eventually he got it lit, and dinner was finally sorted. But he seemed off the next morning. Turns out he'd spent all night battling rats. Larry's always been a bit hot-tempered, and now a single rat had nearly driven him mad. Plus, his living space was rather enclosed, which really dampened his spirits. He even started tearing up, questioning his purpose for being here and thinking a lot about loved ones and the meaning of life. Finally breaking down, Larry wiped his tears and realized something. You don't need to change the world, just yourself. So, the next day, he decided to move. That rat had been gnawing at his sleeping bag all night. Can't we just avoid trouble if we can't face it? Packing up all his belongings, he resolutely shifted his camp. As he walked, his knee suddenly hurt, and his backpack got snagged, and he started complaining again. But as he walked, he suddenly burst out laughing. This new spot looked promising. Wide open views, near a water source, plenty of usable firewood around, and chicken of the woods mushrooms everywhere. He felt like his luck was about to turn. Just a few steps to the beach, and there was even a rocky area under the sun for a perfect sunbath. Life was hopeful again. Nicole must be the richest person here by now. She stored several salmon already. While others are still worrying about food, she's befriended a bear and they go to the beach together to forage, not bothering each other. She's completely integrated into the ecosystem here, feeling more at home every day. Checking her fishing net is the highlight of her day. As long as there's a catch, she could live here forever.
We got a salmon.
Not forgetting to invite the neighbor bear to check it out. Then she pulls out a knife and deals with the fish right there by the river. The bear across the river, seeing she didn't intend to share, turned away angrily, just showing the food without sharing. How unsporting. Look at this big pot of meat. Jose just finished the last fish he caught, and is now sitting by the river, daydreaming. It's the salmon migration season, and if he had a boat to cast nets in the deep water, he'd probably make a big haul. He spent a week gathering materials to build a boat, ropes and wood, and now he's rushing to get it done. He quickly set up a workbench and started carefully cutting the wood to make the boat's sides. If he works fast enough, he could set sail today and catch the last wave of migrating salmon. But things aren't going smoothly. One of the boat's sides just broke, so it looks like his sea voyage is delayed. Mike dragged a box back to camp, chopped some thick pine logs, and tied them under the box to create outriggers to increase the boat's stability and prevent capsizing. True to form as a DIY master, he quickly fixed it up. I'm really worried for him though. This makeshift boat might not survive the big waves. He can't swim, so if the boat capsizes, he'd have no choice but to call it quits. Mike carefully pushed the boat into the water, and it actually worked. He shouted excitedly, calling on mountains and rivers to witness his masterpiece. At that moment, Mike was on top of the world, feeling unstoppable. He even stood up and danced.
This is what being a captain is all about, matey! Yeah!
Suddenly giving off major Pirate King vibes. While others are living like wild people, he started the age of sailing. I'd bet all my spicy sticks on him winning. Meanwhile, a fish swims by underwater, and the next second, Randy's holding it in his hand. His other fishing line caught a small fish too. Having starved for days, Randy's smile is crooked with joy. He learned this traditional fishing method from his dad, so now he's starting to miss his father. It's really tough being here alone. Randy is desperate for someone to talk to. He's not the only one missing family. This is probably the first time Nicole has cried. She misses her kids and is scared that being apart for so long will make them drift apart. After crying, she tries to smile, wipes her tears, and starts cooking the fish. That big pot of meat would make anyone else jealous. Larry just came back from the beach with a piece of hemp rope right behind his new campsite. Now he needs to set up his tent again. The show rules say that any items found near the challengers' campsites can be used. Larry found the perfect spot, set up a wooden beam as a crossbar, then covered it with a tarp, followed by making an A-frame to support the crossbar. This time, he's building a sturdy shelter to make the most of this perfect location. He chopped more wood for the ribs, but the wood he finds is always just an inch too short, which is really driving him crazy. Randy doesn't stop working on his shelter. He notices the walls are a bit crooked, so he adds some more support poles to strengthen them. He's also planning to make himself a small bed. He'll build a wooden frame, lay down some ferns for cushioning, top it with a waterproof sheet, and then place his sleeping bag on top. When he lies down to test it, it's dry, soft, and comfortable. Randy doesn't want to get up. His thoughts drift off to distant places. He imagines sea otters backstroking through the water and crabs hiding among the rocks. Randy strolls down to the beach, gazing at the beautiful scenery, faced with a big decision. Even though he has fish and a house, the loneliness inside is becoming unbearable. He really misses home and his dear wife. Will he give up the competition? Meanwhile, Mike is sitting by the sea, enjoying the scenery without a care in the world, already in retirement mode. Looking at his vacation-style hut, he feels he could live there forever. With never a shortage of food, he decides to find some entertainment to pass the time. He carved himself a pair of dice, picked up some shells and stones, and formed a soccer team.
Sunday night football. We have our two opposing teams, the Scallops and the Stone.
The buoy he found a few days ago has now become a bowling ball. With these toys, time seems to fly a bit faster. To catch small animals, he also made an alpaca live box trap and crafted a bow and arrow, ready to square off with a bear. Compared to Mike, David is nothing. He's still lazing in bed. Doesn't it remind you of not wanting to go to work early in the morning? After dawdling for a few hours, he finally gets out.
It's just too rough.
It would be really great if I could get a hook in the water and get some fish, but they're not going to be here. If I was a fish, I would not hang out in that washing machine, getting banged against rocks and things.
It looks like there'll be no harvest until the sea calms down. Should he consider going into the woods to forage? Staring into the depths of the forest, he pulls out a cap shell and cooks it when he gets back to his hut. Looking at the pile of shells on the ground, there isn't much meat to eat. After eating, he continues to laze around, though he feels a bit guilty for doing so. David finally gets up to finish weaving his fishing net. Relying solely on seaweed and shellfish isn't a long-term plan. After weaving for a while, he notices the camera is a bit blurry and some footage has been lost.
Stuff, but the real burden of being out here is this other full-time job I have of being a cameraman.
Finally, someone complains about the filming issues. It's really tough to be self-reliant and film yourself. After adjusting the recording equipment, David takes his fishing net to the shore, hoping the new net will bring good luck. After setting up the net, he ties a bottle of meat as bait. Everything that can be done has been done. The rest is up to fate. Speaking of fishing, it's time to see how Jose's boat is coming along. He's currently trimming his beard in front of the camera. After cleaning himself up, he starts working on the boat, hoping to eat salmon soon. His progress is going well. The sides of the boat are done, and now he's making the ribs. He cuts many cedar branches, shapes them as needed, wets them with water, and then bends them by heating. The first rib is done, and it fits perfectly. Next, he'll do the same for 12 more. With his experience making Greenland kayaks, this little boat is easy for him, but he wonders how it will perform on the water. Ever since moving to his new home, Larry's been in better spirits, though his clothes don't look great on his increasingly thin frame. After hyping himself up a bit in the morning, he heads out to forage. The resources nearby are really abundant, with good fishing spots and delicious mushrooms. Look at the size. Enough for a day's meals. Now, all he needs is one fish to start cooking. He heads to the beach to check the fishing net he set yesterday.
2 of them are stripped clean. Third one's stripped clean. Dang.
Larry had no choice but to pick up some cap shells from the beach to bring back. Though the ingredients were scant, they were enough to get a fire going. He even poked a small hole with a stick for ventilation, making it safer and less likely to start a wildfire. Soon enough, dinner was sorted. The next morning, he was watering a tree, apparently because the ventilation system wasn't up to scratch. The site of the fire was nearly burnt out, and the tree trunk was almost hollow. Thinking back to how he almost cremated himself last night gave Larry a bit of a scare. Meanwhile, Randy woke up hungry and homesick. It was drizzling outside, but it felt like a downpour in his heart. They say steam baths can relieve anxiety, so he decided to build one. No sooner said than done. He gathered lots of cedar branches, picked a circular spot, and set it all up. Then he heated some rocks till they were scorching, threw them in, splashed some water, and ducked inside, pulling the door shut behind him to wait for the sweat to pour. I was honestly worried he might cook himself. Fortunately, he reassured me with his singing that he was quite comfortable inside. 2 hours later, he emerged steaming, buried himself in water, and next thing, he was done bathing and sitting by the shore in the rain, looking utterly despondent. So much for the steam bath improving his mood. It seemed to have gotten worse. He got dressed, lit a fire, calmly pulled out his phone, and called the production team.
Hey man, I wanted to call because I'm ready to go. I'm tapped.
Considering he'd managed to hold out this long even after losing his flint, that was pretty impressive. He said nature had taught him how to survive and to cherish his loved ones even more. He wanted to go home and reunite with his family. Out of the original 10 in the Wilderness Survival Challenge, 6 remained just after Randy left. Surprisingly, the production team's boat showed up again at the beach, and the person waiting there was Mike. Like you, I couldn't believe my eyes. Had I gone to the wrong place? After that, Mike started packing up. It looked like he was serious, already set as the champion because he missed his wife and wanted to go home. I was speechless. Last night, Justin dreamed he wet his pants, only to wake up and find his sleeping area completely flooded. his sleeping bag soaked through. Turns out, he'd pitched his tent in a marshy area, and the groundwater had risen, flooding the camp. Justin had to rescue his sleeping bag first. His shelter had turned into a complete water curtain cave. He had to set up a temporary shelter, trying to dry his sleeping bag with his body heat and the fire. While stoking the fire, he fought back thoughts of giving up, wanting to stay as an example for other veterans. At this point, only a good meal could chase away the clutter in his mind. So Justin headed down to the river to check his fishing net. Unfortunately, the net hadn't caught any fish. Since the net hadn't yielded any catch, it didn't deserve to be called a fishing net. Justin transformed it into a hammock in minutes. Lying in it turned out to be pretty comfortable, and he spent the night that way.
Tomorrow,
He'll be honoring 22 veterans who committed suicide by climbing a mountain. Cameras and food need to be prepped, and he's got to boil a pot of water, staying hydrated at all times. Due to the atmospheric pressure, the water's been on for an hour and still hasn't boiled. But it's about to rain, so Justin has to move the pot inside. He burns his hand in the process, the water's gone, and it's left him feeling pretty down. The next day, he starts live streaming his life underwater. The whole campsite is flooded, but he can't worry about that now. He said he'd climb the mountain today, and he's a man of his word. Tying the rope around himself, he sets off. Watching his figure disappear into the distance, all we can do is wish him luck and hope he returns safely. 10 people started this survival challenge, and now only 5 remain. Who will be the next one out? Nicole's net is flapping with a big fish again. She's never short on food, making the other hungry contestants envious. She boils the fish and eats it right away. In the morning, as usual, she checks her net. Right on cue, a bear shows up for a stroll. Today, it's the bear dad. He's heard from his wife and kids about a woman who's been stealing fish daily, so he decides to confront her. After circling the net and finding no fish, he leaves in disdain. Nicole, having eaten a lot of fish, looks for some greens to add fiber to her diet. She steps into bear territory, which isn't ideal without saying hi first.
Hello, bear.
It seems the bear isn't home, so she goes straight into his backyard. She knows these roots are edible and anti-inflammatory. Moving forward, she finds the bear's leftovers, plenty and fresh. Someone else might have taken them, but Nicole isn't lacking, so she ignores them. At the river, she sees a group of salmon spawning. Nicole lets them be, focusing only on eating plants. These plants help remove fishy smells, and the plantain leaves act as a disinfectant. Cooked, they taste just like spinach. After a busy day, she's got a full harvest. Tonight, it's salmon with plantain leaves for her. She's full, but others are still hungry. Meanwhile, Larry's mood swings are back. Not only can he not catch any fish, but he's also found mouse droppings where he cooks. He hates mice, so he's setting up traps to deal with them. Round 1, the rock fell, the bait's gone, but no mouse was caught. Larry got mad. He totally took it up with the mice, swapping in a bigger rock and setting up the trap again. Round 2.
I'm so freaking pumped right now, I'm shaking. I finally caught the effing mouse in my Paiute dead.
His rant about it, you'd think he caught a dragon. After dealing with the mouse, he went to check his fishing net by the sea. Lucky him, he caught a big-headed fish and even picked up a crab. After cleaning up the fish and crab, he checked the mouse trap again.
Just freaking squished like a damn pancake, baby.
Reset it, and laid out the gutted mouse next to the fish. In just that short time, the trap collapsed again. Look, another mouse. What a night of full gains for him. 24 days into the survival challenge, while others are still worrying about food, Nicole is already releasing fish to pray for good luck. Her net caught a super big fish. Listen, is this even human language? Would David cry if he heard this? Because the fish was tightly tangled in the net and not cooperating, Nicole really struggled to free it. She carried the big fish to the deeper water area. It hurts me to see such waste of food, but she believes taking what you don't need isn't wasting. David was sawing a tree branch. He didn't get far before he was lost in daydreams. At that moment, all he wanted was a lightsaber, totally not focused on his work.
There's some guy sitting there and he's got a chicken thigh and he's just eating his chicken thigh and he's watching me out here starving to death.
He found out about this. The internet is just too unsafe.